This one is a structure conglomerate which places you within a desert which is bordering on a dark forest. Nearby there's an outpost which looms in the middle of the desert just on the edge of the trees, which is nearby a temple which hangs overhead in the desert. This is a pretty nice one overall just for exploration, and as you can see we're just flying through the sky to give a bird's eye view of everything from down top. Now if you look off into the distance to the right side quite far away, there's some really nice generation far out which you can see, and there's a mix between a lot of greenery and a lot of sand where two different styles of biomes overlay into each other. This is a really great example of the new updates generation, and you'll see things like mushrooms, huge massive trees, multiple forests and grassy fields on the way, which are cut down the middle by huge big rivers and lakes or ravines which stretch really deep down below underground. There's a whole lot to see on this stretch up until the main core parts of the sea itself. A little bit further up, if you go and follow the river which cuts down the middle of the two different styles of biomes, which is the lush green forest and the desert itself, you'll see a very big desert village which blends into the landscape. This is a really nice, interesting area to explore which has some good loot, and it's just a general nice point of interest to see when you're adventuring. Now this is pretty predominant in terms of the seed and quite important because it's quite a unique one in the sense that it's an undead village rather than a normal one. Now if you go deep down underground into a small ravine which is already part of this village, you will actually find one of the brand new Amethyst Geode rooms from the new 1.17 update. If you haven't explored these rooms before, this is a really nice surprise to explore and discover because it's actually already in flush with the village below. It's just kind of cool that the undead village has the secret and surprise that you can find below if you explore in the right place. Now this is just a little bit of a preview, just walking around and exploring the actual village itself. For an undead village it's actually pretty big, and it actually takes up quite a lot of room in the desert itself. There's a lot of buildings and things inside which you can take, a bell, a well, all the general small necessities you'd expect, but it's covered in cobwebs, and for each building there's around one zombie per building, so it's pretty highly populated. This makes it a great place to get the cure achievement. As for the rest of it, there's a huge big set of rolling mountain ranges which you can explore in the distance, which span for absolutely miles. This is an area where you'll find loads of animals like sheep and other animals which wander around the biomes. What's really cool though is by this massive mountain range, there's actually a huge big swamp area which has a gigantic looming mansion which is right bang in the middle of it. This is a pretty looming presence in the area and it can be seen for miles around. Now this particular seed itself, I'm nicknaming it the Pirate Bay because it puts you in a gigantic cove as you're surrounded by a huge big coral reef ocean with a coastal village on the edge of the island by the shore. The reason why I call this the Pirate Bay is there's a shipwreck which is completely submerged above water level, just laying on the beach around, which you can go inside and check out and plunder for yourself. This is a pretty cool seed because the village is absolutely massive and it spreads all across the grassy land area of the shore and a little bit onto the sand as it overflows onto the edges too. This is a really nice village which is completely spread out and it's not too compacted, which means it takes up a lot of the area and it makes it a really great village to actually build and expand upon yourself if that's what you want to choose to do. As you can see, in terms of distance from the village itself, the shipwreck is only just meters away, so you could just swim across or take a boat and go and explore what's inside of it. So if we go deep down onto the second floor down below, I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview of what's actually inside the chest, and these are the materials which you can expect to see when you look inside, so you have a good idea of what you'll be able to retrieve. There's obviously two different levels, and since it's not actually damaged or broken, there's two separate chests inside and quite a decent amount of loot. As for the rest of it, it's just stretches of greenery and islands with a really nice savanna island with a mountain at the very edge. Now, although at the very start of this particular one, I am showing you a really attractive blossoming looking ice field which is in place right next to a mushroom island, that's not actually the main purpose of this seed itself. I'm showing this because there's a huge big large stretch of ocean with an island that has some bones and fossils on, which is a really nice sight to see. Now this is just a completely different area of the seed itself because you will actually need the right coordinates to actually reach the main purpose of the seed, which I'm going to show you in a few minutes, but it's nice just to explore the ice fields and the Mooshroom island, which is absolutely massive. Now the main point of this seed, which will interest most people, is the ocean monument which you can find in the coordinates which I will make sure to cover below. Now the reason why this one is particularly unique is the fact that the Amethyst Geode as part of the seed actually spawns completely connected to the monument itself. It will spawn connected and placed on top of it, so if you swim to the top, it'll be in a shell inside some rock, which can be accessed either from the top room or from above the monument itself when you burrow into it. In fact, in most parts there'll be a hole in the wall where you can just swim straight in and mine away at it. This is a really interesting generation which showcases some of the new updates features and just a really weird sight to see which you wouldn't usually see in the game. As you've probably noticed from a few of the ones featured on the list, I'm really interested in some great spawning villages which spawn in very weird generation situations. For an example, this one spawns right on top of or next to a massive ravine which goes down almost to diamond level, or at least seemingly so, and it goes super deep down into the earth. The village is literally hanging on the edge of this crevice, just as if it would fall in and collapse into the ravine, Ravine and just completely obliterate the village if it hanged on too far. Now this is in a dark forest and on the edge of a normal forest, and it's scattered with pumpkins and nice unique looking building designs. This almost looks like the world has been ripped in two, kind of like the Cataclysm from World of Warcraft. There's of course some other villages if you go further up in the seed, which sit on top of and below the mountains, which are pretty nice. This seed itself is just perfect just to see a few different methods of villages which generate in many different unique ways. I've nicknamed this one Winter Wonderland because it places you on an absolutely massive giant snowy island which makes up as a combination of different snowy and ice biomes. If you go really far out you might see some ice spikes, but there's many different dotted forests which are covered in snow which are scattered all around the island. The shores have icy beaches, and inside far enough you'll see snowy mountains too, which are complemented by some of the new mobs and features of the 1.17 update. This giant land is complemented by a lot of rivers which flow down the middle, some frozen and some broken where the ice is melted or cracked. Like I said, very far out there's huge big rolling snowy mountain ranges, and so many different types of snowy and ice biomes which complement each other and build off each other and are placed in a very close proximity to one another. This really reminds me of the game The Elder Scrolls Morrowind, where there's a DLC pack called Blood Moon, and in this DLC you travel to an island called Solstheim, which places you on a really cold location where there's werewolves. It just gives me a throwback to how that game appeared and felt like. This seed places you on a huge island which is a combination of two different biomes which are conjoined and fused together. The first being a huge big stretch of Mooshroom which is covered in multiple mushroom trees, and as you get a bit further out and deeper it's connected to a gigantic snowy island which has a large village on top of it. This snowy village kind of looks like a Viking village and it's really interesting and cool to explore, and as you'll see where the mushroom island conjoins onto the snowy island, island, it's a bridge down the middle by a huge big frozen lake which connects the two different islands together. And in the distance, if you look far enough, you'll see that there's a giant stretch of desert which kind of mirrors the Sahara Desert in the distance ahead, which you can reach by boat. You might even be able to make out some ice spikes in the distance, and this is just a gigantic archipelago seed where multiple islands make up this formation. If you go closer up ahead, a little bit further in the distance, you will see a ruined portal which is right next to the gigantic ice field with spikes on it, which you can see an outpost connected to a desert and a savanna. So this one is particularly interesting to me because it blends a few different multiple themes together. As you can see, there is a giant ravine in this one too, which is another one of the features which you'll see has been quite common so far, but it's one that's still impressive nonetheless. Now basically this connects a plains onto a jungle, so you'll get a standard plains village, but it's so close to the actual jungle as it's bordering just blocks away, which makes it actually seem like a jungle village itself. Now obviously there isn't actually any unique jungle villages in the game just yet, but since they're so close together and it's overflowing onto the biome next to it, it almost feels like this is actually some special new type of jungle village. Now the cool thing itself here is also the fact that the jungle temple, which is close by, is actually so close that it's also connected to the village. So it almost feels like this village has some kind of ancient treasure inside the structure to explore, or that this temple itself is part of the village. This also adds to the feeling that this is some kind of new village type. This is pretty cool, and it's another new place you can discover. This isn't the only temple though. As you fly a little bit further away, you will also notice a few temples dotted around the mountains across the jungle, which will span for absolute miles. This is a great place obviously to find pandas, and you may have noticed one inside the village itself. In this particular one, there's not really too much to say in words. It's more of one of those situations where seeing is believing. This is basically labeled as a biome conglomerate as well, because it's another one of those ones where there's just so many different biomes close together in a specific proximity to each other. Many different biomes are close by in this one. You'll find plains, huge big dark forests, mountains, frozen, snowy and ice biomes, and deserts to name a few, with some ravines scattered overhead. A little bit later you'll also see some absolutely massive gigantic badlands biomes which are in the distance. Now, particularly on the point of the badlands biome, which you'll see in a few minutes, I really like this because it reminds me of another location in World of Warcraft called 1,000 Needles, where you're in a huge big Grand Canyon like area. Now, if the last one wasn't good enough for you, then here is another one where everything is completely in as close proximity as possible. This one boasts having the fact that there's many major biomes all within 2300 blocks from spawn, which is a pretty close distance to each other if you think about it. Now, this is an absolutely gigantic valley, and just from the point which I'm showing you right here, it kind of looks like a large Canadian forest, but what's quite refreshing is the fact that it's next to a gigantic Arctic ice field biome right next to it as well, and another huge big forest island which is split down the middle by a river. And to top it off, the last one is another gigantic island. First of all, we are going to skim by and fly past this Mooshroom island with a portal in the distance, and as we just fly through and examine most of the things on the way to the village itself, you can see there is so much to see here. There's a few different beaches on this grassy island. There's a pillager outpost which is actually right in the vicinity of the village, making it perfect to start a village raid and get to that point of progression in the game fairly quickly. It's also surrounded by an absolutely massive ice spike biome desert which is just on the edge of the village, making it kind of in the middle of a grassy and an Arctic village situation. As for the village itself, it's pretty standard, but you'll be surprised that there's actually a double blacksmith on this one, making it a pretty lucrative location.